So 41A at the top, we had just finished, or we're in the middle of discussing the procedure for the reading of the Torah by the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. So the Mishnah on the second line on 41A. He reads from the Parsha of Achrimos, which describes the service of Yom Kippur, and also, which also in the same book of Vayikra, the reading about Yom Kippur, the requirements of Yom Kippur, and then he skips part in between, right? We're minhu, so they ask a question, you can skip from one section to another when you're reading from Navi, from the prophets, but not when you're reading from the Torah. So how come the Kohen Gadol is allowed to, or is instructed to skip a piece to get to the next Yom Kippur section? It's not a problem. How long is he waiting? So remember, as we've seen a few times, there's a translator or announcer, not translating in this case, but someone who amplifies the words of the Kohen Gadol. So it takes time, right? So he reads the section, and then there's when the amplifier is broadcasting his words, he's got a few seconds to roll forward to next. Okay, so if it's a short passage that you're skipping, then you can do it without any interruption in the proceedings. But to go to Sefer Bamidbar and find the Parsha of Pinchas, where you read about the sacrifices of the holidays and that would take too long. So okay, this seems like a good answer, but but we taught about that same so when the Brisa says you can skip a Navi, it specifies on how much can you skip a Navi. As the whole procedure is interrupted, you're using the time that the amplifier is broadcasting to the crowd, right? But that implies that that's only a Navi, but in Torah it implies you shouldn't skip at all, because it says this is how much you can skip in Navi, but you can't skip in the Torah. You can't even skip that much. So Rabbi says, well, Kasha can be if you're skipping ahead to the same thing, then it's okay. If you're skipping from one to another in a different time, so then people, I guess the idea is that people will understand that you're skipping because you want to read more about Yom Kippur that sounds a little later. So there's another brayso that says you skip in Torah, you can skip if it's in the same subject. But maybe you can skip between subjects from one subject to another. But only enough if not skips that there's an interruption in the proceedings, take longer than the new place than the amplifier to read or to amplify already read. And you can't skip Navi to another. So in other words, within the books like Yeshayahu, let's say you could skip from one subject to another, but you can't skip from Yeshayahu to Yechezkel. However, in the Shnei Masar, the 12 minor prophets, you can skip from one to another. Just don't skip from the end back towards the beginning. It seems to me like don't skip backwards. How Rashi explains it. So they got to go in order. Sorry. Okay, so we are so this supports the idea that if it's within the same topic, if you're reading everything about Yom Kippur, you can skip from one place to another, even in the Torah. So that explains the ruling of the Mishnah.
So this is specifically talking about Yom Kippur. Does this apply to the usual Torah and Haftarah readings today?
Okay, good question. I mean,
The one day
obviously,
that everybody seems to skip is Shabbat Hagadol for the Haftarah.
oh, so you mean from one Navi to another? So it's
Yeah,
actually
it's in the 12.
fairly common. I think there are several passages in Navi and Haftarah where you skip.
Oh, that's
I
true.
would say
Yeah,
maybe
that's
even
true. Within
order
the
of the
same,
Haftarahs have that.
right.
But clearly, all of these prices indicate that's less of a problem in Navi than in Torah. In Torah, we almost never. The only example I can think of skipping in Torah is on fast days, right, where you read from Parashat Kishisa. It
Right.
starts by Chal Moshe, and you skip maybe a column or so, and then you continue with Zolacha. So that's clearly, it doesn't take any time. So it's really just one column. So in the time that the bracha should already skip to where you're up to where the next piece begins. But I
Although
can't think
then
of
there's,
any other.
yeah, I can think of it. So on Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, Hanukkah, we have
Uh-huh.
Parshat Miketz, Parshat Pinchas, and Parshat Naso.
Right.
And I never
Right,
remember
and we
the
use
order
three
of the last.
Torahs.
Yeah,
We use
we
three
have three.
Torahs. So I always wonder about on Shkalim. When we read Shkalim, so we're usually reading the parsha of the week from either one or two parshas before, right? This usually comes
Right,
out on Truma or Tetzaveh, and
right,
so it's
exactly.
really very little to roll to get to the next section of Shkalim, which is in Kitisa. So I always wondered, like, you don't really need to take out a
You don't
second
really need
Torah.
two Torahs there. Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess it's part of the ceremony of it all. And you have the other three parshas that you read, which are that clearly need a second Torah. So the other thing is that with all the pomp and ceremony that goes with the Hagba and Glila and Mishaberachs and so on, you probably in all that in the same amount of time you probably could roll from one place to another, but. I suppose that there's a sensitivity to this idea that aim the dog in the Torah, so that's why we go with the two Torahs. Okay, so the Mishnah continued. The goal of Torah Menicha B'Cheiko. He rolls up the Torah and he says, "Yoser Mimasha Karasi Kosuvkan." There's more written here than I've read to you. Why does he do that? Sefer Torah, so that people won't think that this Torah is missing stuff. He read from from A to B, and now he's taking another Torah to read or reads Al Peh. He reads by heart the third passage. So people would say, "Oh, what's wrong with that Torah? It doesn't have the third passage in it." So that's why he says, "There's more than what's written in here. Than what I read to you is written in here." In other words, this is a complete Torah. So he reads by heart from Parshas Pinchas about the sacrifices of Yom Kippur. Why don't they roll it and read it from Parshas Pinchas? Why do they do it? Why do they do it by heart? You don't roll a Torah in public, in the setting of the communal reading, because you don't want to keep people waiting. It's not respectful to the people to kind of do this mundane rolling of the Torah while everybody's sitting there and waiting. So I have a second Sefer Torah, right? This is what we do usually. Because you don't want people to think that there's something wrong with the first one. Because you don't do an extra bracha. So of course, the way that Kriyas Torah has evolved, we do lots of extra brachas, right? We do for particular reasons. We do a bracha for every ola. But here it's the same person reading, the same Kohen Gadol, and he would make presumably a bracha before he started reading, and then he would read. And if he would take a second Sefer Torah to read from, he would be required to make a second bracha, and that would really be an unnecessary bracha. Rather, he should read by heart from what would have been from the second Sefer Torah. Or where I asked, really, are you worried? Rav Huna's thing was that we're worried that people will think the first Sefer Torah is defective, missing things. Then Rav Yitzchak say, when you have, as Charlie just mentioned, Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah, maybe Shalosh Taros v'Kara, you have three Taros. Achas Minyan Shal one the parsha of the week. Achas Shalosh Chodesh, one of the Rosh Chodesh portions from Pinchas. V'Achas B'Shal Chanukah, and the third one, the portion we read for Chanukah, which is the donations of the Nisim on the dedication of the Mishkan. So like, won't people think there's a problem with the first Torah? Like, how come the Kohen Gadol reads my heart, the faraway parts, and we take different three Torahs? Like, why aren't we concerned that people will think that the first two are defective? So my answer is plus a governor, but plus a sifrei like a pagama. If you have three people, like three different olim, right? Three people, different people are reading from three different Torahs, then it's clear that it's, there's a different section going on here, a different person, different Torah, right? But chad gavar, betray sifrei, ika pagama. But if you have one person who's reading from one Torah, and then he would start put that aside and start reading from a second Torah, then people would think that the Torah is problematic, the first one. So Mavarich Al Shmona brachos, the Mishnah listed 8 brachos that the Kohen Gadol makes. Al Torah, V'al Havoda, etc. Tana Rabbanan. Rabbis taught about these 8 brachos. Mavarich Al Torah, Kederach Shem Mavarich Beis HaKnesses. So the Torah blessing is the same as we always do in Shul. And these other 3 brachos, Al Havoda and Al Hodah for Thanksgiving and for forgiveness of sin on Yom Kippur, that's the standard brachas we have in other places, like in the Yom Kippur Amidah. How's it go in the Amidah? Melech HaKaretz, before that. Melech Mochel V'Saleach Lavoseinu V'Lavanos Amo Beis Yisrael. The bracha that we end up the middle part of Musaf with is about Mechilas Ava, right? So we know this formula for that bracha. Al Mikdash Bifnei Atzmo. There's a separate bracha for the Mikdash. V'al Kohanim b'fnei atzma, a separate one for the Kohanim. V'al Yisrael b'fnei atzma, a separate one for the people. V'al Yerushalayim b'fnei atzma, and a separate one for Yerushalayim. V'ashar tefillah, and there's a bracha for the rest of the prayer. Tana Rabbanan. Hashar tefillah tchina rina v'akasha. The rest is these are different words for prayer, right? He translates prayer, supplication, praise, and requests. Because people need saving. They need to be saved by God. And how do you end this bracha? Shomei tefillah, as we have in the weekday Amidah. From there on, maybe you stay for Torah, meso, v'karibo. And then everybody would bring their own Torah and read from it. V'kol kachlama kadei laharos chazuso l'rabim. It's kind of it's everybody, show and tell. Bring out your Sefer Torah in public and read it. So it was like a big Simchas Torah kind of festival on Yom Kippur, which is it's interesting. Like, a lot of the Yom Kippur service that the Mishnah describes is familiar to us from the Avodah on Yom Kippur, from the davening on Yom Kippur, but I had actually forgotten about this part at the end, which is, and in our nusach of the davening, it digresses into how the Kohen Gadol would make a party for himself when he came out of the Kodesh, without in one piece, as it were. But I've never. I think this piece of the Sefer Torah festival, whenever I would bring the Torah out and read it, I don't remember this. To encounter it here in the Gemara. Okay, next Mishnah, Parshas HaMelech Ketzad. So we mentioned the Hakel ceremony, where the king reads the Torah to the people. How does it go? What's the procedure? Well, so Yom Tov Harishon Shachag, the day after the night after the first day of Sukkot, Bishmini, on at the beginning of the 8th day of Sukkot, from Motzai Shvis. 1 second. No, the 8th is no, sorry, not Shmini. Sorry, that would be a contradiction. The first Sukkot in the 8th year, meaning b'motzai Shvis, the year after the Shemitah. Right? Osin bo lo bima shel eitz mazar. Build a wooden platform in the courtyard of the temple. And he would sit there, the king. Shemitah, as it says at the end of the verse, at the time of the Shah. So what happens? Hasan HaKnesset is no till Sefer Torah. The person who's called the Chazan, one of the officials of the shul there. Actually, I'm not sure what Knesset here means. It doesn't say Beis HaKnesset, and we're talking about the temple, so I'm not sure what the Knesset is here. Anyway, Nosan Rosh Knesset gives it that we saw before to the president, Rosh Knesset Sgan, so gives it to the vice president, Nosan Kohen Gadol, and he hands it to the Kohen Gadol of Kohen Gadol Nosan Lamalach, and the Kohen Gadol gives it to the king. The king stands and takes the Torah of Akari Yoshev, and he reads sitting. Agrippas HaMelech Amad V'Kibel V'Kar Omed. Agrippas the king, he stood and took the Torah and read it while standing. The Shibhu Chachamim and the rabbis thought this was a good idea. When he came to the reading the part that says, when you appoint a king, you can't appoint someone who is a foreigner. He began to cry because he was not technically he was not a Jew. He was a descendant of Herod, Hortus, who took over the throne from the Hashmonaim, but he himself was not of Jewish lineage. So Agrippas was also from this line. So he cried. They said to him, Agrippas, don't worry, Agrippas. You're our brother. In other words, they accepted him as king despite your problematic lineage. So he reads from the beginning of Sefer Dvarim to the chapter that starts Shema. So 3 or 4 parshias in. Shema Vayim Shema Aster Taser Ki Techal Aster. Then he starts to skip. He reads the Shema, and then the second paragraph of Shema, which is a little further on, and then Aser Taser, which talks about Shemitah. So he skips pieces and reads these relevant pieces. Parshas HaMelech, and then he goes back and reads the paragraph about appointing a king. Brachos Uklalos, and he reads the blessings and curses. This presumably means towards the end of Kitavo, there's the breach of what will happen if you keep the Torah or if you don't keep the Torah. I should go call Parsha until he finishes that section. Brachos Kohen Gadol Mevarich Hosan, Melech Mevarich Hosan, and he reads the same brachos that the Kohen Gadol read on Yom Kippur. Ela Shenosin Shel Regalim Tachon B'Chilas Hava. The bracha about forgiving sins is only relevant to Yom Kippur. Instead of that one, he substitutes a bracha for the holiday because this takes place, after all, on Sukkot. So Gemara says, "Bashmini Salkanata." So Gemara first thinks, as I read it, that the 8th, when it says on the 8th, it means the 8th day of Sukkot, but it also had said the first day of Sukkot. So what are we talking about? Gemara says, "Bashmini." So we're talking about the 8th year. In other words, the year after Shemitah. We're not talking about what day in the year. What day in the year is indeed after the first day of Sukkot. Well, why is the Mishnah being so detailed? Well, not why is the Mishnah being detailed, but why is the Torah being so detailed? B'moed b'keit sheva shanim b'moed shnasa shmita chag hasudas. Right, it gives all these details Tzricha, we need them all. Because of Rachman case, if it said after at the end of 7 years Havamina, I would think like don't when was this command given? In the 40th year after Yetzias Mitzrayim. So that was not necessarily a Shemitah year. Maybe we start to count then for every 7 years from the time that this command was given. Even though it's not the same cycle as Shemitah. So the Torah says every 7th year in the year of Shemitah. Because of Rahman Shemitah, but if it only had said the Shemitah year, Havamina, but so Shemitah, we thought like the end of the Shemitah year before the year ends, before Rosh Hashanah, because Rahman b'moed, it says on the holiday b'moed Shnasa Shemitah Chag HaSukkos. Because of b'moed, if it only had said on Sukkos, Havamina Merei Shata, I would have thought that, well, which moed? It's talking about Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah is the first moed of the year. Because Rahman b'Chag HaSukkos, therefore it specifies which moed b'Chag HaSukkos. Because Rahman b'Chag HaSukkos, if the Torah only said b'Chag HaSukkos without saying on the holiday, Havamina Afil Yom Tov Achron, could be the beginning of Sukkos, could be the end of Sukkos. There's also a moed at the end of Sukkos. So because Rahman b'Vo Kol Yisrael. So the Torah says moed Shnasa Shemitah Chag HaSukkos b'Vo Kol Yisrael, when the people come. When do the people come to the temple? At the beginning of Sukkos. So I assaulted the moed at the beginning. So now we've got all the Chazan Knesses, no till Sefer Torah v'nosel l'Rosh Knesses. So we had this whole procedure where it's passed from hand, the Torah is passed from hand to hand, from one official to the next. We had the same question yesterday about the Kohen Gadol. Doesn't it? It appears that the ultimate destination is the king. So once you have the Torah, you should hand it directly to the king. Why are you handing it to this other lesser official? It appears that this proves that you can honor a lesser person in the presence of the greater person. Just as we answered yesterday, it's all about the king. Like this whole procedure is really about the king. You're not really honoring, the other person in his place. It's understood that this is all part of a ceremony that ultimately ends with giving it to the king. And the king took it standing, and he read it sitting. And Agrippas did it standing. So was he already standing? Like it specifies that the king stands up and takes the Torah. Was he sitting before that? We had this yesterday also. Only the kings of Beis David. It must be talking about the Ezras Hashim. Okay. The same thing as we answered yesterday. And Agrippas, not only, it was questionable whether he was Jewish, but he was certainly not from Beis David, so he would not have been permitted to sit in the temple courtyard itself. The rabbis thought this was a good idea that he was standing while reading Shikhu Michal the Shaper. So they thought that this was a good idea. Excuse me. Rashi. Rashi said, okay, maybe a nasi, like the prince or the head of a tribe, if he wishes to forego his honor, then that's okay. But the king permitted to forego his honor. Tasim alecha melech, put upon you a king. Upon you implies that you should always have fear of the king. So how could Agrippas, by not sitting while reading the Torah, is a mark of I'm the king. So by standing to show respect for the Torah, for the people, he, as it were, he is mochel on his kavod. What's the word? He is he's giving up on his honor. He's giving a pass, and he's not. So my answer is it's Hashanah. When we say that the king can't give up on his honor, that's for a non-mitzvah purpose, but for a mitzvah purpose, that is, as it were, showing great so that deference, that's the word I'm looking for. That deference is permitted in the case, even for a king. So back to the story of Agrippa, so when he got to the part where you're not allowed to appoint a foreigner as king, to cry, and they all said, no, you're our brother. Tell him Yishmei son, the people of Israel, the enemies of Israel, but it's probably a euphemism. The people of Israel were deserved to be wiped out. Because the fact is, Agrippas was a foreigner, so they're sucking up to him. It's not appropriate. Indeed, that they did that, the justice became people became corrupt. No one can say, I'm greater than you. That's what that means. No one can say I'm greater than you. What's the what do we Rashi seems to say it's like, everybody became corrupted and say that they were above this general malaise that crept into society, and everybody kind of bowed their knee or bent the knee to Agrippas. Darish Rabbi Yehuda bar Maravi became Rabbi Shimon ben Pasi. Rabbi Yehuda explained, you can actually look up to wicked people in this world. A wicked person won't be called generous, and a lustful person will be called noble. That referring to Yemos Mashiach, to Messianic time. This is a prophecy that this won't happen anymore. Which implies that in our world, so you could also understand it as it's a hoped for future. Not that it's permitted to do it now, but we're but it's a corrupt world that we live in now. So but the Gemara chooses to learn it as, since we're in this world, the world that we're in, you can suck up to wicked people. Which is Lucky Shamar which has a different source. What you're saying, when Yaakov says to Esav, your face, it's like seeing God. So, or an angel, Yaakov is sucking up to Esav to protect himself. Please direct me. Levi, Mashal, Esav, a parable of Yaakov and Esav's encounter. The other Shaziman Chavero, a person invites his friend to dinner. And then he sees that the hood is going to kill him. He's going to point. Amarlo, so he says, Tabshil Shani time. So that's as suppose the flavor of this dish that you've made, like the king. This is something that is worthy of being on the king's table. Amar, so he said, Yadlai Malka. Oh, this guy maybe is close to the king. Mistafiv lo katile. Maybe I better not kill him fast. Same with Yaakov, and Yaakov mentions, for it looks like the angel I saw. So the idea is that Esav think, oh, this is somebody that maybe God will revenge. I better not. If you suck up to people, you bring anger to the world. Those who are flattering hearts will. Not only that, but your prayer will not be answered. The next pasuk says they won't cry out to him when he Rabbi says, "Kol adam sheyesh bo chanufa," a person who stacks up to other people, afilu ubrin shivnei iman mekalino. So he's cursed even by feeding their mother's womb. Hashanemar tata yikuvuhu amim yizamu alumim. One who tells they are a tzaddik, people will curse him, and leumim will stir up anger against him. Vein kovel klala. What does yikavuhu mean? Means to curse him. Shenamar lo kabo, use that word as, how can I bless the people? How can I curse the people when God does not curse them? You stay in root. Vein lo melubrin, and who are the people, the nation curse them? That refers to fetuses. Shenamar ulo milo yamatz. Yaakov and Esav are fetuses in Rivka's womb. The prophet nation will battle against the other nation, right? Referring to these two fetuses as progenitors of but it uses this nation as the word referring to them as a fetus. Elazar called them.
You just froze.
Yeah, you just wrote. We missed the last few minutes of what you said. Is he there?
He just disappeared. All right, hopefully he'll be back.
Back?
Oh,
Am I back?
You're
Can
back.
you hear me?
You're back.
I'm back.
welcome back.
Where did you lose me? We'll go back to Rebbe Lazar. I'm a Rebbe Lazar.
That's good.
Okay. I'm a Rebbe Lazar. Rebbe Lazar says, Kolam sheish chanufa, a person who flatters, afilu ubrin b'me'ei iman l'kalino. So even fetuses in their mother's womb curse him. Shenamar. Omer l'rosh tzadik atoyikvu amim yizma'uhu lumim. One who calls a rasha, calls him a tzaddik. He'll be cursed by nations. He's amuhu lumim and made and angered by lumim is another word for nations. Vein kovel klala. So yikvuhu clearly is a curse. Shenamar lo kabo el. A similar word is used by Bilam when he says, "How can I curse the people when God has not cursed them?" So clearly that word, that root kuf beis hey means curse. Vein lo'om el ubrin. What is lumim? We understand lumim means nations, but here they're taking a little poetic license and homologically saying this refers to even fetuses. And what's the source for that? Shenemar ulo milom yamatz, when Yaakov and Esav are referred to in the prophecy to Rivka when they're still fetuses and she's pregnant with them, and the prophecy is one nation, one will struggle with the other. So referring to these two fetuses obviously means progenitors, future progenitors of nations, but it refers to them in the womb as nations. So that's where we get this homiletic interpretation. A person who flatters falls into Gehenna. Those who say to call evil good and call good evil, when is it written after that? Like fire consumes straw, and flame will crush the bales or the stubble of straw, referring to fire. So the fire is taken as a reference to the fires of Gehenna. If you flatter your friend, it's not going to work. Eventually, you're going to become his victim. V'imeno nofel biyado, and if not, nofel biyad banav. If it's son, you'll fall into the hands of his son. V'imeno nofel biyad banav, nofel biyad ben beno, or his grandson. Shenemar, Amen ken yas Hashem yakem Hashem as divorecha. Yirmiyahu said to Hananiah, so may God fulfill your words, that you should, like his prophecy was, that you'll return the kalim, the vessels of the temple, to the temple. Uksiv, by he who b'shar ben yamin b'shem bal pekidus u'shmo Yiriya ben Shalomia ben Hananiah. And when they actually came back from Bavel, it was a grandson of Hananiah who was involved in no, sorry, this is not when they came back, but so this is an incident with the Yirmiyahu and the grandson of Hananiah. But Yispasas Yirmiyahu and Navi Lamar, and he took hold of Yirmiyahu and he said, El Kazni Matanofel, you're like praying us to the Kaznim. No, I'm not on the other side. I'm not on the side of the Kaznim. Syria, sorry. And Uriah, this grandson of Hananiah, him to the court or to the officers, and then they threw Yirmiyahu in the dungeon. Yirmiyahu had, kind of flattered Hananiah into thinking that he would be an integral part of returning the kalim to the temple, and by flattering him, his grandson, he fell into the hands of his grandson. Any group, any people that has flattery in it, Mu'usa Kaniva. It's also like Shanamar Ki Adas Chanei Galmud. For a congregation of flatterers is Galmud, which means like forlorn. Shekain B'Krachayam Karolina Galmud. That's Galmuda is used in the islands or overseas for as a word. What kind of word is this? Gemula da mibala. She is separated from her husband. Dalmuda. Okay, so that's a kind of a play on words there, or a mnemonic to understand the etymology of this word. Any group that has flattery will end up being exiled. The congregation of flatterers is forlorn. Elsewhere, the word galmuda is used to refer to is used as part of a characterization of someone who is shkula, galmuda, gola, basura, bereaved, forlorn, and in exile and wandering. So, indicating that a galmuda ends up being a wanderer or someone who is exiled. There are 4 types of people that do not get to be in the presence of the Shina. Kas scoffers, kas hanifim, flatterers, kas shekim, liars, and gossipers. What's the source for all these? Kas scoffers, God withdraws his hand from scoffers. A flatterer will not come in his presence. Kas shakarim, liars, deceive dover shkarim loyikon lenegane. A liar will not stand before my eyes, says God. Kas misaper lashon hara, gossipers deceive kilo el chafetz resha atal lo yigur hara. You're not a God who wants evil. Ra, evil cannot abide with you. Tzadikas Hashem lo yagur b'mgur hara. Which means you Hashem are righteous. Therefore, evil cannot be in your or where you are. In other words, so there's no reference here in what's quoted to Lashon Hara, but further on in that same chapter, it refers to. Let's see, is it quoted here? Uh, it doesn't quote the rest of it, but it refers later in the same chapter to people who have who are speak insincerely or speak poorly of other people. We'll stop here. I hope I didn't steal too much of David's thunder by finishing the parak, but here we are. So he'll pick up here tomorrow morning. Have a good day, everybody.
You know, I was thinking when we were talking about this not flattering a Russia.
Mhm.
We have been doing that for a very long time when we've had rulers whom we wanted to influence. And I'm not speaking the United States so much, but in particularly in Europe.
Uh-huh.
I was thinking of how we would
Think of
try to
Russia today. Mhm.
flatter the czars or Moses Mendelssohn and Frederick the Great.
Mhm.
Frederick
Or
wasn't the worst ruler for us, but he certainly wasn't
yeah, or even today. I mean, there are Jewish leaders in Russia, right, who try to stay on Putin's good side.
yeah, Putin has a rabbi.
Yeah. Well, listen, public life is no piece of cake, right?
Yeah,
Integrity in public life is probably integrity in private life,
yeah,
I would think.
tough. Thank
But-
you, Yasher Koach. Have a great day.
Hopefully this tomorrow will strengthen people's spine.
Amen.